This is Robert Kraft, and I'm your host on SNN.Network. And joining me right now is Scott Powell. He is from VolitionRx. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is VNRX on the NYSE American. Scott, always great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Bobby. It's great to be back on SNN. Thank you for having me.
I know it's been too long. It's only been 8 months, but who's counting? Not me. But before we get to my first question, I just want to let everybody know that Volition is actually going to be presenting at our upcoming virtual event, the SNN.Network Virtual Conference, on August 5th, Wednesday, August 5th, 2020 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can go to conference.snn.network to register to sign up to hear that presentation, and you'll be able to hear the archive version on that if you happen to miss it. With that, Scott, like I said, it's been about 8 months since we had you on the program. You know, the company's put out quite a bit of news since then. I want to hit on the most recent news item first, because I think everyone and their mother who follows Volition was expecting a COVID-19 potential release from Volition, and you guys just released it. I believe it was last week on the 14th, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. So can you give us a little color there and what you guys are looking to do?
Sure, happy to give you an update and some additional color on that news release, Bobby. So as you correctly point out, we are working through our final stage of clinical studies to determine the performance of what we would envision to be a blood test that would be ideally used to triage or stratify persons who test positive for the coronavirus. So what we're not developing is a frontline test to aid in the diagnosis of the coronavirus. There are companies out there that already have pretty accurate diagnostics tests developed. What the doctors, patients, what clinicians are having a hard time with is figuring out which patients who have tested positive for the virus are likely to develop the severe autoimmune response, the severe reaction, the severe symptoms associated with the virus, and those that will develop the mild or no symptoms. Because if there's a test that would be a reflex test to a positive coronavirus result from a frontline diagnostic, and then our test can stratify risk. So in other words, if a person tests positive for the coronavirus, ideally they would immediately then be administered a Volition blood test, our triage test, and then those results would ideally come back hopefully within the same day. And if the person scored very high, and we're using two biomarkers to quantify a person's likelihood of developing severe symptoms versus not, we're looking at total number of nucleosomes in their blood. We're also looking at the amount of nets, that's neutrophil extracellular traps that white blood cells inject into your bloodstream to fight, capture invading viruses. And the more nets that are injected into a person's bloodstream, and also the more nucleosomes, which are chromosome debris, we found in our second set of clinical studies that we announced a couple weeks ago, that those patients who had the highest levels of nets production in their blood and the highest levels of nucleosomes were also the patients experiencing the most severe symptoms. So those were patients who were in the ICU, the intensive care units of hospitals. Those were patients who were on ventilators, breathing machines, who were being intubated, receiving oxygen, et cetera. So what we are doing next is we are organizing. So what we did first is we announced results where we, with 100% accuracy, identified those that had the coronavirus versus those that did not. We then announced results 2 weeks ago where we were able to stratify, and our results showed that people with very low levels of nets production and or very low levels of nucleosomes in their blood were those patients who were experiencing very mild or no symptoms of the coronavirus, and kind of up the ladder, if you will. So those that had moderate levels of NETs production and nucleosome debris in their blood were experiencing mild to moderate symptoms. And those that had very, very high levels of NETs production and nucleosomes were those patients, as I mentioned, who were receiving significant hospital care. So what we need to do now, and we're organizing studies as we speak, is run longitudinal studies to show whether or not we can flag these people early enough, so before they have the severe response and the severe symptoms. So ideally, if a person thinks he or she's been exposed to the virus, goes into their lab or hospital doctor's office, gets a COVID-19 test positive, that person would ideally be administered our triage test, and then a numerical score would come back. And if the score is quite high numerically, that person is very likely to experience the severe symptoms. Now, ideally our test, and this is what we don't know, is we don't know whether or not the nucleosome levels and NETs production are elevated in a person's blood prior to the onset of the severe symptoms. If that's the case, and we really hope that it is, and we do expect that to be the case, but we need to run clinical studies to show this, we could then say to that person, based on your blood test, you are very likely to experience the severe symptoms, the severe hyperimmune response to the COVID-19 virus. Therefore, you need to get into the hospital and get medical resources administered immediately. So this is a triage test to essentially stratify risk and quantify risk to get those high-risk patients the hospitalization and resources, whether it's drugs, treatment, get them on ventilators, get them antibodies, get them antibiotics, et cetera, whatever that might be, so that when the severe symptoms do occur, they're already in a hospital or already receiving treatment. Therefore, will ideally reduce the severity of the outcome and of the damage done from the coronavirus infection, because they're already receiving medical resources. And so it should improve outcomes for patients, and it better allocates hospital resources, because not all of the patients right now that have been admitted to the hospital with the coronavirus necessarily need to be in the hospital. What we've been finding is that the virus tends to create some neurological conditions, and it can impair a person's sense of whether or not they're actually experiencing the severe symptoms. We had stories in our studies in Belgium and Germany where a patient was coming in and said, I can't breathe. And then when their oxygen levels were tested, they were at 95% oxygen. They were pretty good, but they were saying to the doctor they can't breathe because they were probably panicking and had never experienced those symptoms before. And other people were coming in saying, I feel fine. And the doctor said, we just tested positive for the virus. I feel fine. And they're at 50, 60% oxygen. And most of those people really should have been hospitalized. So you can't always rely on self-diagnosis and observation of patients. So if doctors had a quantitative measure, think of it like a lot of your other blood tests. You take cholesterol, a blood test for cholesterol, glucose, triglycerides, PSA, and those are all numerical numbers. So when your cholesterol score comes back, when your results for cholesterol or triglycerides or glucose come back, it's a numerical score. And that signifies whether you're in the normal range or whether you're below or above that range. So we are organizing these longitudinal studies now. We're hoping to have those results by the end of this calendar year, and we're moving to CE mark this product in Europe simultaneously with the organization of these later stage studies. So we're really excited about this, Bobby. We hope to have good news. We'll see.
Absolutely. So in the interest of time, because I think people will be able to hear more about some of the updates too and your presentation next week, but I wanted to get to, other indications that the company's been working on for a long time now. Can we get an update on those as well?
Sure. As we've announced publicly, we've had good results in our first veterinary studies. We're working in collaboration with Texas A&M University, the Veterinary College of Medicine in College Station, Texas. We announced results about 2 months back, I believe, where a single proprietary Volition biomarker, I think we're at about 70% sensitivity at around 90% specificity in several canine cancers. So we are working with A&M to expand beyond a single biomarker, ideally to a panel of 2 or 3 or perhaps more biomarkers, and we'll announce additional results from those veterinary studies over the course of this year and next year. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to push forward and commercialize a blood test to screen for some of the top cancers in canines. So we'll have additional results there. Very excited that could potentially be one of our first US products. We also announced a few weeks ago good results in bloodborne cancers. We had some really good results looking at blood-based or bloodborne cancers. So we are doing additional work in bloodborne cancers and hope to have some additional results before the end of this year as well. And then people know Volition historically as working to develop a blood test to screen for colorectal cancer. So we're pushing forward with clinical studies in colorectal as well as lung in colorectal in Europe and in Taiwan and lung in Taiwan as well. And hope to have some additional results from those two cancer types as well later this year or early next year. So certainly a lot of things going on in terms of clinical trials and clinical data, and ideally start to move some of these products into commercial stage if the performance, if the efficacy is strong.
Well, with that, Scott, I mean, I think you said it all. And for our update here, I mean, where can my audience go and find more information about Volition and follow you guys on social and all that stuff?
I would say the best place is on our website, www.volition.com. A lot of good information there, calendar of upcoming events, a lot of good video interviews of senior executives at Volition. Also some good videos that explain our science and technology in very accessible terms. So all of our press releases, PowerPoints are up there as well, some of our scientific publications. So that's a great place to start. We do have, of course, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn feeds. So investors are welcome to go there. And very proud to announce that that at the end of last month, we were included in two of the Russell indexes, the Russell 3000 and the Russell MicroCap index.
Well, with that, Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Good luck, stay safe, and I look forward to our next update.
Likewise. Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate your time today. Stay safe, be well, and look forward to speaking soon.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care.